Professor Bernadette Atuahene, who's written extensively on the land issue. Her book, We Want What's Ours, Learning from South Africa's Land Restitution Program, details views of South Africans who received compensation through the Land Restitution Program after being forcibly removed from their land. Bernadette, a very good morning to you and thanks for your time this morning. If you can give us just a very quick synopsis of what you found when you spoke to these South Africans who'd gone through this process successfully.
Yeah. So my research for the book included 150 interviews with people whose land was stolen, specifically in urban areas, and who didn't receive and who received some kind of compensation through the Land Restitution Program. One of the most interesting findings that pertains to the bill before Parliament is that the South African Constitution, Section 25.4, says that the government can provide reduced compensation, right? That says that depending on the price that that they bought the land for, and there are certain other factors listed, that the government can, in fact, reduce the price from you start at the market value, and depending on how much the person paid for it, the amount of government subsidy that was included in the land, there's a list of factors that can reduce the market price. My research showed that the Land Restitution Commission was not even doing the research on those factors listed in the Constitution that are allowed, that you're allowed to reduce the price by, which means that those factors, if they weren't even doing the research on them, that means they were not, in fact, inside of the calculations and properly, reducing the amounts that they were paying out. That's huge. Because what that tells us is that we don't necessarily need to move to a situation where we're providing, where it's expropriation without compensation. What actually needs to happen is the government needs to follow the existing Constitution, which says that they are allowed to reduce the amount that they give based on these historical factors. And that's not happening.
Well, it seems now, Bernadette, that we are moving towards, land restitution there without compensation. So obviously we are going to see that the issue is not just going to stop there, because there are going to be winners and there are going to be losers on some level. And one would think that it's not just going to sort of be taken lightly by the losers in the situation.
Right. I mean, that's exactly right. There are winners and there are losers, but you're saying it's not going to be taken lightly by the losers, which I assume you're meaning to be white farmers. But at the moment, the losers are the Black people who have been, the land has been stolen in the past, and they have not received any form of compensation, and they are not taking it lightly, right? In terms of people are willing to rise up. What the point is, a land restitution program is a way to legally channel, discontent, meaning let's try and do this thing legally. And the point is, once your legal mechanisms of redistribution are ineffective, people will then move to other mechanisms to get their justice. And I think that's what you see, what's happening here, because as people become fed up with the redistribution program, the legal program that is not working, people are looking to alternatives. And what I see the ANC doing is basically saying, we hear you. Okay? We hear you. We hear that this program, but what needs to happen, instead of saying compensation, no compensation with expropriation, is working harder to make the existing system work, because the existing provision in the Constitution is adequate if they would in fact follow it.
And I suppose, Bernadette, at the end of the day, it's all more than just about a piece of land. I mean, just looking at what you've written, and the term dignity restoration comes up there. It's not just about the land, is it? It's a whole lot of emotion that goes with this.
Got it. Yeah. So the book develops two main concepts. The first is this idea of a dignity takings. And that's to say that in certain instances, if I take something from you, the point is to give you that thing back, or something that's equivalent to that thing. But there are other instances where I take something from you as part of a larger strategy of dehumanization or infantilization. And in those instances, just giving you the thing back is not enough, because I've robbed you of more than your property, but also your dignity. And I call that a dignity takings. And the takings that happen in South Africa during apartheid and colonialism are the quintessential example of a dignity takings. And the second concept is this idea of dignity restoration. And that's to say that mere reparations is not enough in these instances. Just giving you compensation for the thing taken is not enough. What's required is a more robust remedy that I call dignity restoration. And that's the process of trying to give you compensation for the thing through a process that really reinforces your agency and embraces your humanity. And what's so interesting about the South African process is that is avowedly what the South African government was trying to do, is to go beyond reparations to this larger project of dignity restoration. And my book uses the 150 interviews to evaluate the ways in which the South African government succeeded and failed at this larger project of dignity restoration. And I think what we're seeing today with this bill is a frustration with the lack of dignity restoration, and so now we're moving to a situation of land grabs.
Bernadette, if I can ask you very, very quickly, we've had an issue that's come up, and it was raised in Parliament by one of the opposition leaders, saying, when you say give the land back to our people, who do we sort of classify as our people? Because you have, yes, you have, you know, those who are from here, you have African, you have Indian, and then you have white, and then you have, like, for example, I'm going to say maybe second, third generation Indians whose great forefathers came here as basically slaves to work in the sugarcane fields. Are they supposed to be the givers, or do they become the recipients at the end of all of this? How do we navigate around that? Is that a valid question?
Yeah, very valid question. And I think the way, you know, the proper way to think about it is the giving, the who that it goes back to needs to be defined by vulnerable populations, right? It needs to be going back to those who need the land, because it does no service if I'm giving it back to you, and you can already take care of yourself. You're already doing just fine, right? Even if you're the Black middle class. In my opinion, the we that the land needs to go back to is vulnerable populations. And that vulnerability can present itself in different ways, but that needs to be the focus. That needs to be the we, because that's what happened when you talk about this dignity taking. It created an asymmetry of power. And this land restitution and redistribution needs to focus on correcting that asymmetry of power by focusing on giving that land to the powerless.
Thanks very much for that insight, author. That's Professor Bernadette Atuahene weighing in on the land issue for us here on Morning News Today.